It's easy to believe that deep inside the boardroom of every motorcycle manufacturer, there's a deeply confused group of people pulling the strings. A cabal of executives that are far from hardcore riders themselves, but instead marketing professionals, emissions specialists, tech bros, and maybe one guy who rode a Honda back in like 1985 and they still consider him to be the core market research. It seems like these thought leaders have decided they know what we want in our motorcycles more than we do. They think that we want a motorcycle that behaves less like a fire-breathing death machine and more like a smartphone on two wheels. They think we're chomping at the bit for bigger screens, complex menus, more features and farkles that make your life potentially like 0.05% easier some of the time. Meanwhile, I think most riders want a motorcycle that maintains mechanical appeal, something that responds directly to rider input and is simple and easy to own. A bike that demands your attention and makes your brain shut up for a little while. So today, let's talk about what manufacturers think riders want and why it's more often than not tragically wrong. With the widespread adoption of automatic or semi-automatic motorcycles, you might think that manufacturers just decided, hey, what if we just removed all of the fun parts of riding? I think companies have convinced themselves that the biggest barrier to riding is manual shifting. Psst, I think it's more likely because of money. The sweet, sweet dollar bills, it's probably money. I hear way more prospective riders discussing the financial challenges of motorcycling than I hear them say, man, I love bikes, but that manual shifting stuff is practically rocket science. Of course, Honda has been running DCT models on Africa Twins and Goldwings and Rebel 1100s for a long time now, but now they've got the E-clutch on the CBR 650R and it's coming to more models as well. Yamaha has an automatic version of the MT-07, BMW and KTM have also both poured millions into figuring out how to let you ride a motorcycle with as little effort as possible. Look, automatic transmissions make sense in a lot of places. Scooters, commuter cars, hell, I could even make the case for an automatic Goldwing. And my personal daily truck, I do not want that to be a manual. It makes sense when a bike is basically a two-wheel touring steed with a cup holder and a CB radio. But when manufacturers start slapping automatic or semi-automatic systems onto sporty naked bikes, it stops being a matter of convenience and more a dilution of experience. Manually shifting gears on a motorcycle shouldn't be seen as some cumbersome chore, but part of the ritual that makes riding such an engaging and connected experience. It's a physical action that is satisfying in a way no button-clicky DCT shifter could ever match. And it's just so weird that there's no real evidence that normal riders actually want this. It kind of feels like it's being hoisted upon us. More often than not, when these new automatic models are unveiled, they are met with far more criticism and concern than enthusiasm. Manufacturers aren't responding to rider demand, they're responding to bottom line fear. They're terrified that the entire motorcycle market is shrinking. And guess what? They're kinda right. They're concerned that future generations of riders will be far more concerned about convenience or ease than with analog thrills. But from where I'm sitting, that doesn't seem to be the truth. And in fact, I bet people will prefer an analog experience further into the future as we get more digital. Watch this space. Somewhere in Austria, feeling refreshed from their mandatory 6-week summer holiday with a belly full of Apfelstrudel and Germnodel, a suite of KTM executives signed off on adding additional launch control to the KTM Duke 390 because they are of the belief that jamming as much performance tech onto a bike where it is completely unnecessary will incentivize a bunch of young people with tech-addled brains to beg their parents to co-sign on a 6 to 7 year loan. Newsflash! Small displacement motorcycles don't need launch control. They barely need traction control. If you're spinning the tire uncontrollably on a 40 horsepower bike, that is not a software issue, that's a skill issue. And honestly, I'm impressed. I can't even do that. And in many ways, unnecessary tech like this often makes small bikes way worse to ride. The fun factor of a lower powered bike comes from the ability to ride at or beyond its limits. breaking the rear loose during heavy braking, clutching up little wheelies, and if the motorcycle has too much safety tech, the throttle response will be flattened. Power can be cut right when things are about to get exciting. It makes a bike feel nervous and neurotic instead of confident and playful. Small bikes have a toy-like quality. You want to play with them, ride them hard, feel everything that's happening in real time. If the experience gets buried under a mountain of unnecessary tech like traction control, rain mode, launch control, overly intrusive ABS, it becomes sterile and timid, which is the opposite of what we want our small bikes to feel like. Manufacturers think high-end performance tech that trickles down from their Halo bikes onto entry-level models adds value, but it can really detract from the overall experience instead, in our opinion. Aerodynamic winglets are the sport bike equivalent of a stretched swing arm on a Grom. Think about it. It's pretty much the same thing. On a superbike doing 190 miles per hour down the back straight of your favorite track, aerodynamic downforce is a real consideration for keeping the front end down and improving braking. And yes, if you're homologating the bike for racing use, you want those winglets, baby. It genuinely makes the bike perform better at the highest echelons of motorcycle racing. But you know what does not qualify as the highest echelon of motorcycle racing? Playing grab ass with your buddies on the local twisties. I'm talking about MotoGP, World Superbike, the arenas where fractions of a second determine wins or losses, or qualifying first or 19th in case of MotoGP. But then somewhere along the way, riders saw winglets and thought, damn, that looks fast. And manufacturers realized that they could sell that aesthetic to everyone. Now, you got bikes that barely break 110 miles an hour rolling around with full aero packages like they're qualifying at the Mugello Grand Prix, being piloted by a guy whose grasp of the Italian language is limited to what he can find on the Olive Garden menu. A CBR 500R does not need winglets. I'm going to lose my mind. The CF Moto 675 does not need brake ducts. Your commute does not require downforce. It kind of reminds you of the guys with the Porsches with the giant wing out the back. What the hell is even that? You're commuting to the office. What are you doing? The laws of physics do not threaten to impede your trip to the coffee shop. But manufacturers know racing cosplay sells, baby. So they bolt on winglets, fins, scoops, and ducts that functionally do nothing, yet gives the bike an aggressive look. If you think aftermarket winglets are making your R7 faster, you probably also think The Fast and the Furious is a documentary. Middleweight sport bike, beginner bike, leader bike, blah, 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 blah. This year it's different. Look at this thing. Transverse V, green, Moto Guzzi. Have you ever seen anything like it? I sure haven't, and it's up for grabs on YamiNoob.co. It's our newest giveaway bike. You've been asking, begging, pleading for something different. Well, here you go. This is what it looked like. You may not like it, but this is what it looks like. Become a member on my website, join the Discord, have a good time, get all the exclusive content you could want, and you'll get entered to win this machine. If that doesn't sound good to you, you can always pick up some merch. A hat, a hoodie, a t-shirt, every dollar you spent is an entry to win, subject to a multiplier. Don't sleep on it, hit that link down below. Now let's get back to the show. Bigger is always better, right? Pickup trucks, flat screen TVs, the spread at the Golden Corral, the women at the Golden Corral. Come on, more cushion for the pushing, am I right? The same logic must apply to motorcycles, right? Or at least that's what manufacturers want us to think. The Ninja 400 became the Ninja 500 because we were all more eager for 4 little more foot-pounds of torque in exchange for the extra $1,000 on top of the MSRP. That's what everyone wants, right? We all want beginner bikes to be heavier and more expensive for marginally more torque. False. Nobody wants that. It's just an emissions game. If they make the Ninja 400's engine 50cc bigger, making relatively the same power, it will be more aligned with modern emissions standards. That's it. But that's not really sexy, is it? That's not going to get people excited about these updated models. So they'll say, oh, it's new and improved. The Ninja 500 is the most cutting-edge entry-level sport bike to ever exist in human history. KTM loves doing this too. Every year, half of their models get an extra 50 or 100 cc's of displacement. The Super Duke is growing so fast, you'd think it has an overactive pituitary gland. But I don't think riders are actually asking for any of this. If anything, you'd think they'd want KTM to make engines to actually last a few years and actually hone in on build quality for once. Instead, they get motorcycles that grow and grow and grow until there's something completely different. heavier, more expensive, more complex. No one is asking for incremental displacement gains every other model year. And if they are, well, they have a double-digit IQ. I don't know what to tell you. There's an invasion happening. Tiny, sub-300cc motorcycles are infiltrating American soil, coming before your very eyes. It sounds strange in 2026, but more and more incredibly small motorcycles are slipping into dealerships. And I'm not talking about small beginner bikes like 400 to 500cc's, which is sort of the current standard these days, but I'm talking tiny, like 250s, 230s, even 150cc's. KTM offers their Duke 250 unnecessarily slotted in beneath their Duke 390, a motorcycle that is pretty approachable in both power and price for a large portion of Western buyers. But I suppose when your Duke 390 has launch control, traction control, and an intercontinental ballistic missile attached to the back of it, you gotta offer something a little bit more low spec, right? Or consider Kawasaki's KLX 230, similarly positioned beneath the already pretty entry-level KLX 300. Or what about Honda's XR150L, a bike that doesn't really fit the bill as a mini bike like a Grom or a Monkey and is far less capable than the CRF 300L. Even Royal Enfield's 350 models, which being larger than 300cc's, they make less than 20 horsepower, which is half of the power that a normal entry-level machine makes. So why do these bikes exist? Well, the sad reality is they're just typically spillovers from dense Asian, Indian, or South American markets where very small, affordable bikes are the norm. Well, then why are they sold here? I mean, let me put on my tinfoil hat for a second, but since bikes this small and this low on power serve virtually no function in 90% of the American landscape, I think there is a more bleak reason for their existence. I think manufacturers realize that a significant portion of the younger population will never have the ability to afford a modern beginner bike. I mean, home ownership, out the window. New car, out the window. New bike, nope, out the window. I mean, certain models can cost nearly $8,000 out the door if you're to buy them brand new, and by the time this demographic can afford toys like that, they've grown older, their priorities have shifted, and they've probably lost all interest in motorcycles entirely. I am of the belief that these ultra small CC bikes that are super cheap are meant to get low earning riders hooked on bikes while they're still young and broke. That's just my theory. So, do people want these 15 horsepower models? Not really, but I think it's all part of a larger manufacturer psyop. So we've already discussed how performance features can be really unnecessary on a lot of motorcycles, but even more so are the features that literally do nothing, like the LED startup sequence on a CF Moto 450 SS headlights. I mean, who the hell cares? Somewhere along the way, motorcycle manufacturers forgot that bikes are fundamentally meant to be simple. 2 wheels, an engine, and enough chaos to pacify your inner demons for at least a little while. Instead, modern bikes are as complicit in this techno dystopia as big tech or Korean EV companies. Back in the day, real men used to pull the choke, find top dead center, and then kick the engine over until it decided to fire or snapped your ankle clean off. Look, I don't long for that time, but it is undeniably a stark contrast to today where starting your motorcycle feels like booting up your Lenovo ThinkPad. Also, I think it says a lot about our society that inside the owner's manual, it reminds you to not lick or eat your car battery. Think about that. You've got keyless ignition, Bluetooth connectivity, wireless phone charging compartments. It's all a little much, don't you think? On some bikes, you can even adjust the traction control level without diving through 3 different layers of menus and scrolling past ride modes like Urban Rain Dynamic Pro Soft Off-Road Custom. Actually, that's my favorite category on Pornhub. All these features cost money to develop, to install, to inspect, to repair under warranty, and when they inevitably break, which they probably will as electronics are far less robust than mechanical components, you're on the hook for it. Even on old bikes that were incredibly simple by comparison, electronics always become a pain point. Corroded wires, faulty sensors, diodes, switches. Look, I don't know, I'm not an electrician, but you get my point, right? Imagine the problems that are going to arise in 10 to 15 years when modern bikes today start to age into electronic decay. It's not going to be a very fun time. I think they designed these bikes to be largely disposable, unfortunately. Manufacturers think riders want all these gadgets and all this addition adds up to so much more value, but really, I think many of us would just prefer affordable, robust, simple machines instead. Am I turning into a Suzuki person before your very eyes? Maybe. Electric motorcycles should have been a commercial slam dunk. Instant torque, low maintenance, and silent operation that won't disturb the neighborhood. That sounds great on a PowerPoint presentation if you're a gigantic dork, but yet they've been the biggest flop of the last decade. Livewire is out here literally setting money on fire. Energica went bankrupt. Zero seems to be shifting more towards electric dirt bikes, as Stark has proven that is the only viable option. Why don't street riders want electric bikes? Well, because they're gay. Because motorcycles are about feeling, sound, smell, vibration, character, real manly stuff. A V-twin feels different than an inline four. A triple feels different than a single. There's a connection between the mechanical components and the rider that is just completely absent on electric bikes. I think manufacturers thought that motorcyclists cared about speed and power, and that's it. And electric bikes accomplish that. Many are quite fast and quite punchy, but that's about all that they offer. And as it turns out, it's all the other aspects of riding that motorcyclists deeply care about. You want to fire up the engine. You want to hear it rumble. You want to feel the way it vibrates going down the road. EVs were a glaring example of manufacturers really having no clue what riders actually want and trying to force stuff down our throat that we don't want. Manufacturers think they have the power to influence trends and shape the taste of riders, but I feel like that is rarely the case, and actually, it's quite the opposite. They keep chasing technology and features instead of rider experience. They keep investing in buzzwords instead of riding culture. Motorcycles are supposed to make you feel something. It's that intangible X factor, but they fail to implement X factor into a broad corporate strategy. So instead, we get more winglets and more smartphone rider apps. Great. Thanks so much for watching all the way to the end. I will catch you guys in the next one. Fact: giraffes have the same number of neck bones as humans do. Goodbye.